Okay, and so we've already begun our recording. So with that, I would like to hand this off to the mayor to start our first session of our Public Safety Advisory Task Force.
Great. Thank you so much, Waddell. Really appreciate it. I promise to be very brief. I just wanted to thank everyone, all of the task force members, for your willingness to spend this time with us. I know we've got 6 focused meetings over the next 2.5 months, and to produce an actionable plan that will go back to the city manager and therefore our new police chief, Jeff Glover, who just started yesterday. And just really looking forward to hearing the conversation. I think it's a very diverse, eclectic group of people with perspectives that will really create a really robust, thoughtful dialogue. So I'm just really appreciative that you're choosing to take your time to be with us today, and what is a very important conversation, not only in Tempe, but frankly, regionally and nationally. So just thank you for your time, and looking forward to the discussion.
Great. And Mayor, could you tell us one phrase of hope for today? Or did you already enter that in chat?
I would say not a phrase for hope for today, but I would say by the end of the sessions would be consensus.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. With that, I'd like to invite City Manager Andrew Ching.
Thanks, Waddell, and thank you, Mr.
Thanks,
Mayor. I'm very pleased and excited to be a part of this group that the mayor has created to have this very important discussion about public safety. This national conversation that has been going on for a very long time has certainly accelerated during 2020, as we all know. And at least for Tempe, we have made a very conscious decision to embrace the notion that change is positive, that change will bring about the sorts of relationships between our public safety professionals and the community that they serve that we can all be very proud of. I think in looking around all the different panelists who are here, I recognize many of you. I salute you for your service generally, and specifically for the service that you are undertaking to be part of this task force. I look forward to getting to work with all of you a lot more over the coming weeks and months, up to the point where, as the mayor said, we hopefully get to that point of consensus. I look forward to listening and learning from all of you, from your experiences and you know, your sense of what is right, equitable, and just for this community, both from a law enforcement perspective and also from someone who cares very deeply about this community that we all either live in or work in or touch a concern in some significant way. So to all of you, again, thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thanks, Andrew. And I'll pass this over to Jeffrey Glover, our interim police chief.
Thank you, Waddell, and thank you, Andrew. You know, I just want to thank all of you for your participation in this process, because this is very important for us, and it's going to help shape the future initiatives and policies for the police department. So it's really, you know, something that is going to be, you know, for us, meaningful and impactful from the standpoint that we really want to hear from our community members. And there's many of you that are on here that I do know, and I know that you're going to have really important dialogue and initiatives that you want to see come from the police department, and we want to be there to be able to support any of the ideas, any of the concepts. There's nothing off the table. Completely open to really listening and hearing some of what you have to say, and I'm just very honored and privileged of being able to come back to the city of Tempe to be the police chief. And you know, I can't say enough about how excited that I am to have this opportunity to be a part of this committee as well. And so with that, I thank all of you, and I thank you for taking the time for being here this evening.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. And I'd like to pass this to Sergeant Robert Ferraro, the president of the TOA.
Thank you, Waddell. My name is Rob Ferraro. I've been in law enforcement for about 13 years now. I wear a couple hats in the department, one as the project director over the opioid response project, and then the other as the TOA, president of the TOA, which includes our officers, sergeants, and detention supervisors. The TOA I would characterize as the voice of the rank and file. I've been president for a little bit over 4 years now. I can tell you, I never wanted to be a cop. I had zero desire ever to be a cop. When we played cops and robbers as kids, I was always the robber. I worked for about 8 years after graduating college in the financial service industry in New York City. And on September 11th, 2001, I lived the World Trade Center attack. And so I was blessed and fortunate to be able to escape out of the building, but 33 of my friends and coworkers didn't. And so for me, that was the pivot point in my life to where I was going to enter service. For me, that was law enforcement. And I share that story only because it's to relate how most cops, they don't view this as a job. They view it as more of a calling. And for me, that was the right thing to do and leave my job at that moment. And so through a series of events, I landed in Tempe. I'm passionate about several things, two of which that are important to this task force are behavioral health and then also police officers' voice. And so in terms of behavioral health, I've served on the board of directors of Crisis Response Network, which is Arizona's crisis line. I currently serve as the co-chair on the Continuum of Care for Maricopa County, which receives HUD funding for homeless services. I have lived experience with behavioral health. My uncle died by suicide and lived life with schizophrenia. And so it's near and dear to my heart to ensure that our officers are equipped with the tools and skill set that they need to encounter individuals that are experiencing behavioral health crisis. So that's very important for me. Lastly, I'm not the typical union president, union person. In fact, I find some of the traditional union tactics to be abhorrent, and I don't agree with many of their stances. My role is not to protect bad cops. My role is to stand up for due process and the law. I don't want to represent bad cops, and I don't want to negotiate a contract that represents or protects bad cops. I'm here because I want to be a part of the solution. I can be your ally, and I want to be your ally. I have the trust and the backing of every single one of our officers that wears the uniform, and I hope through this series of conversations, of meetings, that I can gain your trust as well, because I want to be your ally. Thank you very much for letting me attend.
Thank you, Rob. So we are going to move next to me. You've been hearing my voice and seeing my video since you onboarded. And my name's Wydell Holmes. I'm a strategic management analyst in the Office of Strategic Management and Diversity. And I will be your facilitator over the next few sessions, over the 6 sessions that we'll have together. And tonight's session will look a little bit different than what you'll experience for our future engagements with you. Tonight will be about setting a baseline, kind of laying the table, and be more presentation. We will ask you for some reflection as well as some questions that we can prepare for future engagements. You'll see that we'll always circle back to items of interest that you might have, things that we need to add additional information, whether it be here in the workshop or sending you information online. So with that, though, I'd like to turn it back to you, our group here. And I also want to, before I do that, introduce Elisa Euler. She is our tech producer. So if anytime you have any tech problems or questions, please feel free to send her a chat message. Her name is Tech Elisa. Her mom didn't name her that, but that's what we're calling her tonight. And so if you have any problems, just please let us know. We'll try to do our best to help with you, and we'll move from there. So as you were coming into the session tonight, I don't know what you were expecting, so I did want to share with you the agenda. And we're going to be doing a round robin introduction, and we'll use some of the information that you put in the Zoom chat. We're also going to, as part of our first part of the session, go over the process and the overview, kind of to see what have you gotten yourselves into and what will this look like. And then also we're going to then move into our presentations on leading with data, with what the current state is, and we'll wrap that with priorities and performance measures, your survey results, as well as a presentation with the police department. And then we'll close and figure out our next steps together towards the end there. We will be having breaks in between these sessions, so know that when you go on break, you can turn off your camera, but we do ask that you leave your camera on during the session. We'll try to make this as high touch experience as possible in our virtual world. So again, tonight will look a little bit different than our future sessions, and you'll have a lot of time to talk in our future sessions, and tonight we'll just try to set the table for our baseline of information. So with that, we're going to start with telling us what you put in chat, and we'll probably ask you to be brief, and I'm going to actually call on the first person who put her information into the chat as we requested, and that is former council member Pam Gronkin. So after Pam, we'll have Sue Ringler and Vice Mayor Keating, so you can prepare to have your mics off. Or your mics on, sorry. Right, Pam, thank you.
Thank you, Wydell. It's wonderful to be here with all of you. Many of you I do not know, some of you I do. I'm looking forward to working with all of you. As a former member of council, I've long been a firm believer in justice, and I think that we can always do better, and that's what I hope for our task force to be able to recommend ways that we can do better. I have a long history in Tempe. Before I served on the city council, I was a member early on of the Human Relations Commission. I have people in my family that are diverse, and I respect them and seek to show that we have justice for all, regardless of how they might be different from us. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I look forward to hearing everything you have to say and to recommend, and I hope that I can make a contribution.
Hey, Sue, Vice Mayor Keating, and then Roy.
Hello, my name is Sue Ringler, and I'm affiliated with the Tempe Interfaith Fellowship. I'm also the director of the iHelp shelter that's run by Tempe Community Action Agency, and I'm a former pastor. I just put that I just want to learn. I want to learn because I know in this particular area I'm not as well versed as other areas, and I'm for our first evening I just want to learn. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we'll have Vice Mayor Keating, Roy, and Robbie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Vice Mayor Randy Keating. I'm with the City of Tempe. The phrase I put in the chat is success through collaboration. I would like to see us come together. We have quite a diverse group of community leaders and subject matter experts in this field. And I said during my swearing in that it would be my dream that there was a time when our mayor and our police chief are going to conferences around the country talking about how Tempe did it and how Tempe got it right. I believe with this group of experts, there's a very, very good chance that we'll get there. So thank you very, very much, Mayor, for having me on this board. I'm looking forward to serving with you all.
Thank you. Roy, Robbie, and then Melody.
Good afternoon, everyone. Roy Tatum. I serve as the president of the East Valley NAACP. Also serve as Sheriff Pinzone's chair for African American Outreach. I wear a number of hats. I also like to consider myself Corey's personal advisor unofficially, and also Chief Glover's personal consigliere unofficially as well. I'm not new to this space of policing, public safety. I've worked in this arena for over 2 decades, and honestly, this is probably a dream come true to really come to the table with the mayor, the police chief, city council members, and the city manager, and the president of the union, all committed to achieving successful and long-term reform, and with input from all of us. So this is a dream come true, and I'm looking forward to the dialogue and to the solutions that we create here. So my let me follow your instructions, Waddell.
Thank you.
My word or phrase was honest, open dialogue, solution-oriented dialogue.
Great. So thank you. Yes, we'll be giving name, organization, affiliation in that phrase that describes your hope for today. So we'll move over to Robbie, Melody, and then Janelle.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Robbie Adler Tapia. I am a longtime Tempe resident and a psychologist, and I work with community mental health and child welfare, and I also work with public safety. I have done over, and I'm going to 100 post-shooting debriefings, so I have that expertise working in the trenches. But I also have written a book about how trauma affects the brain. So my mentalizing to understanding is, and using psychobabble, I'm sorry about that, but understanding how we affect each other and how we may trigger each other and each other's trauma, and that we start to come together to understand each other and how we affect each other. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And Melody, Janelle, and then Jacob.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melody Elkin. I am the chef owner of Sweetest Season Artisan Eatery. We are a restaurant in South Tempe. And my affiliation really with Tempe is sort of a career chameleon. I've met several of you on this call in several facets of my career and journey through Tempe, but I'm a resident here, a business owner here, Black American woman, which I think is relevant to add to the diversity of our discussion. Very happy to be here. And like Roy mentioned, I just think it's a special opportunity to be asked to be at the table and to have a voice to contribute to a topic that I think is of the utmost importance to discuss. And I think if anyone can do it, it is the collaborative and creative, free-thinking minds of Tempe. So I'm very happy to be a part of this discussion.
Thank you. Janelle, Jacob, and then Dr. Gutierrez.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janelle Wood. I am the president of Black Mothers Forum. I'm a concerned Black mother, and I'm going to stick to the script. I'm associated with Tempe through all of my work with ASU and a lot of my Black sons and daughters who live in the area. My phrase describes my hope is I want to have authentic conversations. I want us to be collaborative and solutions focused. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for sticking to the script. So I'll move to Jacob, Dr. Gutierrez, and prior to that, Dr. Tapia. Or we already did that, sorry. So Jacob, Raquel, and Dean.
So good afternoon. It's good quizzing. Jacob Moore. I'm Associate Vice President of Tribal Relations for Arizona State. I would say my affiliation is with Arizona State University. I'm not the official spokesperson for ASU. My role in terms of tribal government and tribal communities is obviously attached to my own background. I'm a Tohono from Southern Arizona, Akimit O'odham on my grandfather's side from Gila River. My mother is from Montana, so I'm also Lakota, Dakota, which is Sioux, part of the Sioux Nations up in northeastern Montana and South Dakota. So I am honored to participate with this group. In many ways, a long-time Tempe resident. My father started at ASU in 1959. And so we lived in Guadalupe at the time, and my babysitter when my dad was going to school at ASU and my mother worked for the Department of Transportation was somewhere around 6th Street and Ash. And so I've been around Tempe since I've been about 4 or 5 years old. And so I'm not going to tell you how long that's been, but my parents do have a home in Tempe, graduated from Marcos de Niza. In some of my prior work, I worked as the Special Assistant on Congressional Legislative Affairs for the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community. I was also the intergovernmental liaison that worked with the surrounding jurisdictions for Salt River, including Tempe, Mesa, Fountain Hills, MAG, state agencies, federal agencies. So my background has been in public policy, but from a tribal perspective. The last thing I would add is that in terms of background or affiliation is that I've been serving on nonprofit organizations for urban Indian organizations in Phoenix and the Valley, going back about 40 years, actually serving on an advisory committee to the city of Phoenix in around 1979 when I was about 19 years old. So in some ways it comes full circle. My goal, I guess, is for today is a clear understanding of the hopes and aspirational goals of the group by sometime before we get to the end of the meeting, if not
Great.
sometime in the process of our meetings. So thank you.
Thank you. And so we'll move to Raquel, Dean, and then Arlene.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. This is Raquel Gutierrez. I go by the pronouns of she, her, and hers. I want to give proper honor to the land that we're currently doing this work on, which is Peepash and Otham. I am a consultant that works around the country with foundations and nonprofits, and I have been doing that work in one form or another for the last 30 years. And but today my affiliation is really grounded in being a lifelong Tempe resident. I was born in Mesa, raised in Tempe, all my three first years of elementary, middle school, high school, and my first going to university was all here in Arizona, in Tempe. Of course, Congressman Mitchell was one of my high school teachers, Neil Giuliano. Mayor right after him was my first boss out of college. I was a sister city delegate. I was married in the oldest church in our community. So I take being a lifelong resident pretty seriously. And my hope for today is that we can gain some shared understanding.
Thank you. And then Dean, Arlene, and Mark.
Hi, I am Rabbi Dean Shapiro from Temple Emmanuel here in Tempe, and I'm also a participant in Tempe Interfaith Fellowship and a resident in Tempe. I hope today to better understand the structure and mandate of this organization and to get a sense of what positive contribution I can play.
Great, thank you, Rabbi. Arlene, Mark Wittenberg, and then Rob, or actually Rob, you've already gone, sorry. Hassan, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arlene Chin. I am a former council member. I was the first Asian American council member for Tempe. I am also a lifelong resident of Tempe. And the phrase that I had for today and every day, I think, is that we have open, honest, constructive conversation to help our community. And I'm honored to be working with all of you.
Great. And then Mark, Hassan, and Janae.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mark Wittenberg, and I am the technology guy for the city of Tempe. And like many of you, I was born and raised in Arizona, and I've been a Tempe employee actually for many, many years. I'm very excited to be part of the group today to really see how technology can be leveraged to help provide solutions. And I'm also hoping for that open, honest, and collaborative communication today. Thank you.
Thank you. Hassan, Janae, and then Councilmember Kubi.
Yes, my name is Hassan Al-Saad, and I've been in Tempe for over 25 years. In Arizona altogether, I've been like about 34 years. Most of the times I spent it in Tempe. I served on the Human Relations Commission. I was part of Tempe leadership and Tempe Cares, and I did a lot of volunteer work. And also I attended the Islamic Community Center in downtown Tempe. And I have the respect. I also have the respect of the Muslim Police Advisory Board in the Phoenix metro area. What I'm looking for here is really I want to learn more about the issues we have in our city here, and really come up with some real good solutions, reforms that's going to help everybody and makes everybody happy.
Thank you. And Janae, Councilmember Kubi, and David.
Good afternoon, everyone. Janae Harrison, Equity and Inclusion Manager for the City of Tempe. The word that I wrote was collaboration, and mostly it is such a privilege to see the diverse faces and voices and perspectives represented here today. So though we're not digging deeply today, I certainly look forward to the great work that's to come. Thanks, Lydell.
Thank you. Councilmember Kubi, David, and I'm scrolling here, Jacob.
Thank you, Lauren.
I already did Jacob's.
Councilmember. And I come imbued with a sense that social, environmental, economic justice, racial justice are the highest callings that we have as officials, but I'm also sitting here before you as a white woman who has never had to fear when her child left the house. And I realize that the voices that are here today are representing a lot of other voices. And I hope throughout this process, we'll be able to be self-critical, that we'll be able to even change the process if we find we're not getting what we need from it. And also understand that we need to really talk about, there are people here representing those who are the families of survivors and of victims, and I have such respect and heart and condition, and knowing that we have people here who are representing the community, the larger community, and those that have been victims of police violence. I want to ask uncomfortable questions. I want to answer uncomfortable questions, and I come here with an open heart and an open mind.
Right. Thank you. We'll go to David, and then Genevieve, and then Nikki.
Briefly, there's 2 Jacobs here today.
I'm sorry, Jacob. We'll go with you. You're on.
All right, perfect. Well, my name is Jacob
Rayford.
Oh, yeah, it's all right. No worries. My name is Jacob Rayford. I am the communications director for the Be Rising Project. If you've been watching the news since late May, we are solely responsible for one of the main organizations behind the protests and demonstrations that have been taking place since the end of May out in Phoenix and Tempe and abroad. So what we hope to accomplish, by having one of our representatives here, being myself, is discussing the disparate treatment of the Black and Brown communities and what we can do to approach the ending of systemic racism through these particular subjects. And dialogue is important. In order to push the needle, it's important that we sit down and have a well thought out and the conversation about how we can make these changes as a progressive city here in Tempe and across Maricopa County.
All right, thank you. We'll pass to Genevieve, and then Nikki, and then Shireen.
Thanks, Idell. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here with you. I'm Genevieve Vega, special organization effectiveness consultant, which means I help organizations manage change, particularly technology changes. So I will be asking a lot of data questions, I promise that. Other affiliations in the city, I just finished my 6th year on the Tempe Community Council Board of Directors, so human services in the city is something that I've actually presented to many members on this call a number of times. So human services is a big area of focus for me. I also serve on the board of directors for a very small nonprofit that serves disabled youth in Tempe called Believe I Can Academy. So disability issues are really important to me, particularly non-visible disabilities and how those folks are represented in our city. I'm a mom as well and a longtime Tempean, so I'm definitely bringing that perspective. And my hope really is, I'm a process person, so I want to understand the process that we'll follow, the methods that we'll be employing, and how we'll govern our conversations over the next several months so that we can, again, reach consensus and have good collaboration like others have mentioned.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Genevieve. I'll pass to Nikki, then Shireen, and then Suzanne.
Hi, everyone. Nikki Ripley, Communication and Media Relations Manager for the city. And my hope is to just be of service to this group to make residents and community members aware of, along the way, the good work that you'll be doing and what it all means. So I'll be helping to make information available and describe and promote what you're doing. Thank you.
Shireen, Suzanne, and then Bill.
Hi, everybody. I'm honored to be here with you. This is an amazing group of people, and I have high hopes that we're going to actually accomplish great things. My background, I've been here a long time. I am not a native to Arizona, though, but I'm a long-time Tempe resident and raised my family, my kids here. Jacob, my kids went to Marcos, so we can have that in common. I currently am faculty at Mesa Community College, where I teach classes that are related to cultural anthropology and deal with humanity and how we can work together in a multicultural way. So I'm constantly having these discussions with my students about multiculturalism and inclusion. I also, in terms of Tempe, just briefly, I've served on a lot of different commissions, boards, nonprofits, human services, very much like Genevieve. I'm very involved in that. That means a lot to me, having served for TCAA and TCC as part of it, also historic preservation. So looking at how we preserve our communities are all part of that. So I also am on the City of Tempe Police Citizen Review Panel currently. So I think those are some of the things that I bring. For me, the other last point about myself is I am first generation American. Both my parents are immigrants. So I have that perspective. And I will echo what a lot of you have said in terms of what I hope for here. I look at inclusion as being important and collaboration. Thank you. I look forward to working with you.
And then we'll pass to Bill, Michael, and then Viri.
Hi, I'm Bill Burke. I'm truly impressed by the makeup of this group, and I'm proud to be with all of you. I am the Tempe City Prosecutor. I've been a prosecutor in Arizona for going on 25 years now. And what I would like to see, like I said in the text, was understanding, collaboration, and trust between the government and the public. I feel we truly, as the government, are here to serve the public. And when we lose sight of that and the public is not happy with us, we're not doing our job. So I think this is a great group. I think that hopefully we will make some headway into this area. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. We'll move to Michael, Soto, Viri, and Alana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Soto, and I'm the Executive Director of Equality Arizona. My pronouns are he and him. Like I said, I'm the Executive Director of Equality Arizona, and it's our work to work for the safety of LGBTQ people throughout Arizona, in cities, towns, and throughout the entire state, because LGBTQ people disproportionately experience violence in all forms, from interpersonal violence to state violence. My hope for today is that we lay the foundations, create the conditions necessary to do our work together in a successful and meaningful way.
Thank you. Viri, Alana, and then Mike Pooley.
Hi, everyone. This is Viri Hernandez with Poder in Action, she, her pronouns. Poder in Action focuses on organizing around state violence, particularly work with families, mothers mainly, and sisters of people, victims of police violence, people who have been brutalized, sexually harassed, shot, or killed. So hope to be able to bring that perspective, but as well to make sure that they're incorporated in these processes and prioritizing. And hope, right, for this moment, or for today, or maybe not today, but in the next meeting, to get clarity around how we are thinking about this issue. You know, it's really hard to find solutions or think about solutions when we don't acknowledge there's a problem. So I would love to have clarity around our orientation, our intentionality in these next 6 sessions. So thank you all. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Viri. Alana, Mike Pooley, and then Rosa.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's great to be with all of you, and it's great to see a lot of familiar faces, those I haven't seen in a while. My name is Alana Chavez Langdon. I'm currently responsible for external affairs and public policy at Nikola Corporation. It's a zero emissions mobility and energy company. However, I do want to stress that my involvement on this task force is really not representing Nikola and as affiliation, but as a longtime Tempe resident and a mother of a child of special needs. Specifically on the autism spectrum. I am a longtime resident of Tempe, about 20 years, and with many years of community involvement and service in our city, which started in the late 90s and went through the 2000s. My first boss was Neil Giuliano when he was mayor, in my last year at ASU from 1997 to 1998. And I helped him establish the Human Relations Commission at that time, which was a great honor. I'm here and very much appreciate the invitation by our mayor to join all of you to work on this great task force and what's before us. I definitely want to lay out that I respect the role of the police department and public safety, what it does in Tempe. However, the efforts of this task force are timely, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you towards building our community back up and stressing respect for both the law, but also the rights of the individuals and those that interface with our police department in Tempe. Rebuilding that bridge of trust is extremely important between the residents as well as all those who come here to our city. And I hope that this will start the discussion among us of what does responsible policing mean, and hopefully we can start talking about what that looks like here in Tempe, Arizona. So I look forward to working with all of you again, and thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to circle back to Suzanne. My apologies. I called on her and then I kept rolling.
Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces. Thank you, Wydell, for facilitating for us. My name is Suzanne Durkin Bighorn, and I'm a longtime Tempe resident. I've been serving on boards in not only Tempe, but across the valley for about 15 years now, dealing with leadership development and human services most of the time. In my work life, I have a small consulting firm that works with nonprofits in infrastructure and capacity building. What brings me to this committee is that my family is a little different. My children and husband are Native American, so I bring the perspective of a white woman with a Native American family to the conversation, and how that might be slightly different than what Councilmember Kuby mentioned about how you send your children out into the world, and how that experience is different from my own family and for female siblings as mothers, and how we've parented and the different challenges that we've had in parenting throughout the years. On this first day, I'd like to just get an understanding of what this task force is going to be and the vision of all of you and how we're going to work together. I'm also, I've had great interactions with the City of Tempe Police Department. So, and yet I know that there is always room for us to have improvement in our systems and how we manage the workforce within the police, and also in the community, our responsibilities, and how we support everyone equally and equitably, regardless of what zip code they live in or what they look like or anything like that in our community. So thank you again for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Thank you, Suzanne. And then I'll pass to Assistant Chief Pooley briefly, and then to Rosa.
Good evening, everyone. Hope you're doing well. I'm excited to be here as well and get to know each and every one of you. I am a people person, and I truly do want to get to understand where you're coming from. I want you to understand where I'm coming from too a little bit. And sometimes people just see the badge and the uniform and they automatically may think one thing, but I grew up a little bit on the Navajo reservation. I'm Navajo and Hopi. My mom's from Hawaii. There's a lot of things. I was talking to my dad earlier about this, and he was saying, wow, I never would have thought you would be on something like this, but he's excited, is just as excited as I am as well. I know that I can tell you right now, we are not a perfect organization. We have made mistakes. We can do things better, but I want you to understand, and I'm hoping by the end of this, within the next 12 sessions we have, that you build confidence in the police department that is here in the city of Tempe, that we build these relationships, that we can have conversations. And I'll tell you, we are willing to listen, and we are willing to make things better than what we have now. And I'm excited to hear from you, and I want to be honest and open, and I promise my feelings won't get hurt. So I'm looking forward to it. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. And it's also my pleasure to round up our introductions with Rosa and Chastity.
Good evening, everyone. Rosa and Chastity. I'm the Director of Strategic Management Diversity, and it's really, truly my honor to be here with you today. I am not only an employee of the city for 28 years, I'm also a resident of the city, so I'm a neighbor for 28 years. I chose Tempe for the very reasons why we see all of these squares on and everyone on this call. This is the values that I have chosen to raise my family. I am a daughter of two Cuban immigrants, so we had very long conversations about the impact that government has on the quality of life for families and individuals. And I chose this career to make an impact, to make sure that we have quality of life for our families and our communities. So it's my honor to serve along your side, but also what I'm hoping today is that you each know, as I receive texts and chats about what an amazing group, that's you, each one of you. And this doesn't happen without each one of you contributing your honest and trustful feedback that we're going to take action to what you share with us. My hope today is that we build trust today, and we keep building on that trust with every meeting that we have. Thank you.
Okay. We also have Randy Perez, who hasn't had a chance to introduce.
No worries. Hi, everybody. I'll be brief. I know we're running on time. My name is Randy Perez. I'm the Democracy Director at Living United for Change in Arizona, or Lucha. 6 years, Tempe resident, came down for Arizona State University, didn't leave. For me, I'm already feeling just very grounded in the difficulty of this conversation around policing, just being here with you all and knowing what's ahead of us. It's not an easy conversation for a lot of us to hold, especially that come from impacted communities like this. So looking forward to learning and listening. And my hope is that these things are actionable. It's well past time. There's a lot of urgency amongst us to get things done. So to leave with a real substantive plan that has structural changes and not just nibbling around the edges anymore, because our people cannot wait for that. And that's why I'm here. So thank you for the opportunity to introduce myself. Thanks.
Thank you, Randy. So with that, I want to jump into our strategic planning process. And some of you have asked, I want to know what we're here for. And so in our office and in our organization, we always start with purpose. And the purpose that this group and the mayor has invited you to be part of is to create and establish a strategic plan. And this plan will be designed and co-created by you for trust, accountability, and dialogue with the community and the police. Our process focuses on outcomes in regards to trust and accountability, and also assembling allies. And then our main deliverable, when we're successful by December, we will have a strategic plan that we can deliver to the community for comment in January. Tonight's orientation will look a little bit different in regards to, it's more presentation based, but I will speak a little bit about the process that we'll use for future workshops. Our next workshop is on the 28th, but prior to that, I'd like to invite you to enjoy and to join us in a tech orientation so that you can have kind of a high touch experience and engagement with the process that we're going to share together. And then I'd also like to let you know in November, and then following that on the 10th, we'll do some visioning and barrier identification, and then we will actually start creating strategies. And then by December, we'll have plan elements for endorsement. We were very careful in regards to which process we selected for our organization in regards to strategic planning. And this process evolves around conversation. So it was very heartwarming to me to see in chat that we had a lot of dialogue, a lot about shared interest and conversation. So you're right up my alley in regards to really what the intent of this process is supposed to be about. And then also consensus, getting agreement. And we've created this process based off of some national, international models in order for us to get consensus around very complex issues and perspectives. So our strategic planning process was adopted by our office, which Rosa leads, and we adopted this about 4 years ago, and it's based off the Institute of Cultural Affairs Technology Participation. And again, like I said, key strategic deliverables here that we'll have for the mayor and for the city manager. One thing I would like to share with you is that we will be providing documentation for this session, both publicly and to you individually. So if you're trying to take notes and capture everything, don't worry, we'll have all of this ready for you in a day or so for you to either review or reference back to. The other thing I'd like to share with you is in our process, this you can see here on the right, that was actually, I think it was our Family Justice Commission, if I recall, but we use a platform where everybody's voices are heard and where we can honor each person's perspectives and come up with collective ideas that we would never have come up with individually. So this method, not only does it use time efficiently, it builds consensus in that collaboration, it also can create, generate innovation, and we also walk away with a commitment for action and that shared accountability. Again, it's scalable. We've utilized this process with 12 to 90 people. We've utilized it with some of our Tempe commissions, as well as our city departments. We have worked hard to move this platform of consensus building and focused conversations to the virtual realm. And so we'll have grace with each other as we move through this, but ultimately we will be able to engage amongst ourselves to create that plan. The workshops that we'll go into on the 28th, we'll start with a focus question, and then we'll do some brainstorming and grouping, because we're always looking for relationships among ideas, but you'll get a chance to talk in small groups as well as in the large plenary group, if you will. We'll also do some naming and creating descriptive phrases so that we have a lot of clarity around the ideas and strategies that we're putting into place. Another element about the process I'd like to remind you of is we will have 6 workshops. They'll be about 3 hours in length. We will be taking breaks, and then we'll run these workshops from October through December. Again, we have tech training on the 20th and 21st at 4 p.m. If you're not able to make one of those tech trainings, we'll send you a registration shortly this week. Please reach out to Brianne and we can work with you to schedule a time that's convenient for you. One of the key values that the city holds is our transparency and our engagement with our community. So Nikki's group, she introduced herself earlier. Her group has set up a public web page, and on that web page, it's at tempe.gov Public Safety Advisory Task Force. Again, you don't have to write it down. It'll be in your notes that we send you. You'll be able to view the agendas, past as well as future agendas. They'll be posted on the Fridays prior to our workshop. We'll also be providing all the documentation and the video recordings of the sessions. So again, we will record both video and chat, as well as post those with our Channel 11 team. So all of this process is really about respect and openness and having true organic dialogue and creating a bigger whole and a better whole for all of us out of our individual perspectives. And it also is about being committed to what we create. There will be a lot of curiosity in our future workshops. There'll be a lot of ideas that we can explore with each other. And so I'm really looking forward to facilitating that alongside you. To get to all of that, we do need some agreements for kind of our new virtual meeting space, and you've probably all been experiencing this since March or so. The main thing I'd like to share is that if you could remain on cameras, except for breaks, we would appreciate that. And then when you're talking, if you could say, "I'm complete" afterwards, that way we know that we're not interrupting you, and we know how that goes over technology. The other thing is you will have some opportunity, even in tonight's session, to provide some reflective comments for us. And that helps us as the planning team and facilitation to you inform us of kind of where we want to go with our next steps, as well as giving us a sense of how we're doing as we move through these workshops. So if you could raise your hand in Zoom when it's reflection time, we will lower your hand, which will invite others to speak. So the example would be if we ask you a reflective question, everybody raise your hands. And then as you speak, your hand will be lowered, and then we'll know that you've already had some of your airtime. And then I always just say, go with grace. That's my daughter's middle name. And so we'll just give each other grace as we move through the technology and this virtual space that we're creating together. So your first reflection, remember that the first direction was to raise your hand in chat on Zoom. I'm sorry, not in chat, but on Zoom. And we'll go with, I'd like to ask you, in reflecting on the description of the process and the introductions, what seems hopeful about this planning process? And on our screen, we're seeing Elisa here, and as our tech producer, she's going to be describing or scribing your answers. And so let me go to, just a moment, please. Trying to see who has their hand up. And if I could maybe call on Councilmember Keating. What seems hopeful about this process for you this evening?
It seems well thought out and well laid out in order to solicit everyone's opinions and get feedback, and then make those conversations available to the public. So from a strategic management standpoint, to me, it seems like it's a pretty robust process, which ultimately is good. It will take time to flesh out the best ideas and how we're going to work those ideas. So I'm pleased with how staff has framed this discussion moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, great. And I just want to mention, and thank you for that, the questions that are going into chat, we will also be able to address those in future sessions. So keep the information flowing. We also have some other hands raised. If I could call on Arlene.
What I'm hearing and what I'm seeing also in chat are areas of information, data that people are requesting.
Okay.
To me, that's an indicator, it's a great indicator that people want to be very thoughtful and have as many data points as necessary to make some comprehensive recommendations, and not simply predetermined ideas, but to really be thoughtful. And that's really hopeful for me.
Okay.
And I'm complete.
Thank you. And also, please feel free to raise your hand. In regards to your hopes and promises. Anyone else? I don't want to miss anybody who has their hand raised. I'm looking here through the chat.
Am I supposed to raise my hand electronically or physically? Am I physically raising my hand?
If you could, you can physically. I'm trying to get my video back in, but Roy, you go ahead.
I'm learning all this Zoom.
That's okay. We give you grace.
I'm over here with my hand up. But,
okay.
But I think what's happening, there's a gap because there's people, many are new to this space. They're concerned about the community, and they are aware that there's an issue, and they've been working in their lane, so to speak, but they haven't been working with police. So there's, I believe, a role for our police department now to talk to us about where they are, who they are, what they're thinking, how they're feeling about this. No, not taking anything away from the facilitated discussion, but I think that many come to this space not really familiar with the inner workings of Tempe PD, and I believe that many people will probably. And I'm sure we'll get to that, but I think there's a gap right now that prevents us from maybe even focusing on what this process is until we get some basic data and information of where we are right now. Just what I'm feeling.
Thank you for that. We appreciate that. So other cautions or promising pieces about the proposed process?
Rydell, this is Raquel, and
Thanks,
I can't figure out how to raise my hand with the Zoom.
That's fine.
But I do want to say that I think one thing is that that is hopeful is there actually is a process and it's been defined. One place that gives me concern is not seeing adaptability in the process that's been laid out. And to Councilwoman Kuby's remarks earlier, that wanting to be able to see where there is flexibility to change the process if necessary, which I think there are some opportunities for change, particularly as it relates to who's already in this conversation and who is not. And so I'd like to know, not right now, but I'd like it to be addressed at some point early, like maybe the next time or even before the next time, how we might be doing check-ins around what needs to be adapted as the process goes on.
Thank you for that. And Melody?
That's all.
You're complete, right? Thank you. Melody?
Yes, thank you. Since Mayor Woods posted this task force, I've seen some interesting public opinion and perspectives on the group in general. So my question really is, what is the expectation for all of us in terms of speaking outside to media about this process or speaking to individuals about this process? The information that we're provided with, how we speak on that to the general public or media. I'm just curious what is recommended. Obviously, the recordings are made available for the public, so I suppose they could take a look at that on their own. But I'm just curious about our personal interpretation and putting that out to the world. What is recommended for that?
Okay. Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, I can't speak to that question right now, but as I mentioned earlier, we will be taking this to inform how we navigate the entire process. So with that question, and also in regards to GAP and adaptability, that is part of the process. So I would just like to share that. We'll be doing touch-ins and check-ins. If I failed to mention that during my overview of the process, I apologize. Genevieve.
Yes, thank you. I also appreciate an organized process, and thank you for outlining our topics as we go through. A couple of things that I didn't notice was, we talk about consensus for this group. There's been a lot of questions raised as well about public input. Will there be pulse check surveys? Will there be any other ways for us to kind of gauge, the direction we're headed in? I'm also curious about where kind of our brainstorming notes are going to live, if they're going to be on that public site, or if we have information that we're chewing on, so to speak, right? That we don't know where we're going to continue that conversation. Where does that live, and how do we continue collaborating on that? And that, sorry, so many questions. I'll try and just keep it to one more. The other thing that I was thoughtful about is same like was mentioned around, public commentary and what we're allowed to say and what we're not allowed to say. I've had a lot of people reaching out saying, make sure you ask this, don't forget to do that. And I'm like, hold your horses. I gotta find out what this is all about first. Right. So there's a lot of interest, which I think is so great. But we could definitely use some guidelines around that. And I think some established group norms around how we agree to disagree would also be really, really helpful, I think. That's it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. And Randy, then Alana.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for this process. I actually just wanted to comment on one of the underlying values and kind of just where I landed seeing it. I think one of them was just about respecting every opinion, there being value in every idea and experience. I just want to say that's not how I'm coming into this conversation. There is no value in an experience or an idea rooted in white supremacy or perpetuating violence against people, whether it's from the state or from your neighbors, your individuals. And I just cannot kind of, as I've been sitting with this for a few minutes, kind of this tension around that of if there are comments or ideas that are rooted in the idea that a group of people or an institution such as the police can do this kind of work against us or in any way, that's not something that should be tolerated by anyone here, especially folks that are most impacted by this. So I totally understand the value. I'm happy to listen, but I just want to make sure that that's not something that's going to be a part of this conversation, because it should not be, because that will not be productive. It is actually antithetical to the idea of reforming public safety and reimagining what it means for impacted communities. So complete, thank you.
Thank you. And Alana, and we'll wrap up our reflection period. Thank you. Alana?
Yeah, so I just wanted to reiterate, I think this is a wonderful first step to brainstorming and bringing everybody's, initial thoughts together, but definitely want to make sure that we start to put some kind of a framework, identify, the mission, the goals, what are some key buckets and areas that, we feel need to be addressed in order to start shaping this and these recommendations eventually that, we want to bring forth to the community. I also think that opportunity for public input, is very important before these things get adopted. I think we need to have a two-way dialogue and make sure that the community feels that they've been a part of this process as much as, we have been brought together as thought leaders and and individuals that the mayor, respects and wanted to be a part of this process, and that, people feel safe. I think having that trust among us and being able to express our ideas and, where we're coming from. I have a little bit of a different opinion than Randy. I think that that people need to be free, that there are some, ideas that might not be popular, but I think it's important that they get brought forth so that we're able to speak about them in a way that, makes sense for going forward. Because unfortunately, whether we like it or not, there are some very unpopular ideas and beliefs out there, and we may not like them, but we have to acknowledge that they exist. So in some ways, I think we just have to work in the context of what the reality is right now, and that's the only way that we're going to be able to bring real solutions to the table. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for participating in that reflection. As you can see, Elisa has scribed this. This is one of the ways that we will take notes as well as document, as I mentioned earlier, as part of the process. So with that, we are actually going to take our very first break, which we try to give you a break every hour, just for a little stretching perhaps, maybe some water or coffee. It's 5:09, and so we will convene back here on camera at 5:14. So we'll see you in about 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, thank you for being back from the break. Just want to get a thumbs up from Rosa that she can hear me okay.
Yes, all good.
And I want to apologize. John, did we call on you for introductions? Hope he's still putting in his headphones. Hi, John, did we call on you for introductions? Oh, it looks like you're still muted, John. Let's see if you can unmute.
Lower left-hand corner, John.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
My
That's
fault.
okay.
I'm John Mulford. I'm a 30-year resident of South Tempe. I've participated in a lot of committees in the city, most noted as the Neighborhood Advisory Commission, which was an enjoyable experience. I've been president of our local homeowners association. I'm co-chair of this year's GAIN event for Warner Ranch. And I am a very active person in the bicycle community, interested in bicycle laning and sharrows and the way that we build on our bicycle community here. I have a particular interest in the policing of the city of Tempe, and I would just end that by saying I'm really concerned about where we are with diversity within the police department, and as we look at reforms, as reforms are needed. And I'd finally like to welcome Jeff Glover to the community. I've spoken with him beforehand. He's a terrific guy, and I'm very excited that he's a part of the City of Tempe Police. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and my apologies for skipping you earlier. And did I miss anybody else? Please feel free to chime in right now. You want to turn off your mic and introduce yourselves. So with that, I'd like to pass over to Rosa and Chelsea for our next session.
Thank you, Wydell. Thanks again, everyone, for coming back from your break on time. It helps us stay on track. So as Wydell has mentioned, facilitation of creating strategic plans has been our work for the last 4 years at least. And if you haven't known this already, our City of Tempe is very well known for being a data-driven organization. And not just because we say so and we'd like to brag about that, but actually we've been identified as a gold city standard by the Bloomberg Philanthropies as really, I think I heard Randy say, how do we take action? It's using the data and making decisions with that data. And I think that has been what's been remarkable for our organization in the last 4 years, is how do we take that data from every department to advance the 5 high-level council priorities, which is 1, safe and secure communities, which is why we're all here today. So I'm going to share with you just a snapshot of some of the performance measures or the goals as we identify with the police department over the last few years and some of that data. Then Assistant Chief Pooley and Chief Glover will present data from the police department, a deeper dive into the data that they do have within their own department. Please know that this is the starting point of the conversation of data. We will take notes. We actually have Jonay Harrison is scribing everything today. So we will be reviewing the video, taking notes, and making sure that you have the data to help make your decisions, just like what we do for our mayor and council. So performance measures. We have a great portal that helps identify about 106 performance measures, which are our goals to advancing the high-level priorities of the mayor and council. And that's how we've organized it. And not just because we feel this is the best process, but we know that just consulting with the best nationally, this is the best way to do this. So 9 high-level performance measures that helps advance safe and secure community priority and a strong community has been what you see here. Feeling safe in your neighborhoods has been one of the items that we've been working on with the police department. Crime reporting, police services satisfaction. How well is the community feeling like the police is responding to service? Victim of crime, which I'll get into, worrying about being a victim. So we not only want to know about what the hard data says, but also perceptual data about, even if we do the best things, do people still feel unsafe? That's a valid question. Violent cases clearance rates, it's okay. Feeling of safety in parks. We've heard a lot of conversation about G4S, about park rangers over the last few years, about people wanting to feel safe in their parks, and we'll talk about that. Police worn body cameras. We're talking about the body worn camera and how that helps to build trust with the community, very important, and police trust score. So the next slide. So these are the 5 high-level council priorities, as I mentioned: safe and secure community, building a strong community connection, quality of life for people, as I mentioned once before. Who doesn't want to live in a neighborhood or a city that creates quality of life? Sustainable growth. We want to be very mindful of the resources we use, and then obviously the financial stability that helps us accomplish all these economically. The portal is there with a lot of data and a lot of detailed information. And once again, I'm sharing with you just high-level snapshot, and we can bring back more information. I don't want to take up too much time from Chief Glover and Assistant Chief Pooley and all the deeper dive information. Next slide. So this is distilled down to those 9 performance measures that I just showed you, and I want to share with you just a snapshot. Feeling safe in your neighborhood. So our baseline and our target and our current helps us identify, are we moving the needle in the right direction? This performance measure is based on our community survey. It's an annual survey that we've had since 2004. So we have some good trend analysis. More importantly, ETC Institute, who we partner with to conduct the survey anonymously, they do this nationally and internationally. So they have a good database of benchmarks for us to look at, creating a target that is the national average. And you will see on some of these, there's an asterisk that says top 10%, because either we have surpassed the national average, so we want to keep pushing ourselves to be better. So I'll start with the first one. 1.05 is basically the code we use to identify the performance measure. Feeling safe in your neighborhood. The baseline was 70 when we first started conducting the survey question with the community. And our target, as identified with ETC Institute, said the national average is about 71. We identified the target. We want it to be at least 80% or higher. So that means we want at least 80% of our community to say they are feeling safe in their neighborhoods. We are currently at 73. The next performance measure, crime reporting. Reporting property crime and violent crimes. We want to make sure sometimes people do not report crimes, and you will see this across the nation because they feel their police departments are not going to respond to those calls, or they're going to respond too late. But we want to make sure this sentiment is measured, and we look at property crime. Baseline was 73%. Our target is at least 65%, and currently we're at 79.3. Violent crime, 77. Target is 53, and 79 is the current. And I know you probably asked yourself, just like I did and many others, really the national average is 65 and 53 that we base that on? Yes, and that's part of the conversation we should be having. Is that enough? No, and I think that tells you the state of what's going on nationally right now. 1.07, police services satisfaction. Overall satisfaction with our police department. Baseline was 81%. We wanted to reach a very high target. We had surpassed the national average. We need to pause there and know that we had surpassed it, and we identified that we wanted to be in the top 10%. So that would be 90%. We are currently at 75. So yes, it is below our target, and those are things for us to consider and discuss. I should go back to the crime reporting. That is exceeding the target. So those are the green arrows, or at least identified areas. 1.09, victim of crime, no violent victimization, and no property victimization regarding that. We see the baseline 92, and the target is 97, and we're currently at 93. And that specifically, we're looking at on the community survey, and the target is set by the uniform crime reporting stats that are created nationally. Worrying about being a victim. We want to know what people think about. Are they worried, back to that sentiment in the community survey regarding, are people worried about being mugged? Are they worried about being burglarized or having their car stolen or broken into, or being a victim of theft? And we can see there that, and I'm trying to get rid of the little chat box so I can see. Don't you love virtual platforms? Getting mud is 66%, and the target is 70, and we're at 67.8. So we are close to reaching our target. Burglarization, 43%, 44%. Our target is 57, but we're currently at 39.5. Car stolen or broken into, 45 is our baseline. We want to be at least 57%, and we're currently at 39.1. And victim of identity theft, where the baseline is 31.9. Our target is to be at least 30% of our community would say that they do not feel worried about being a victim of identity theft for cybersecurity. And I know Mark Wittenberg's on the call. And we are currently at 35.8. So that is actually probably one of the things that people worry less about is the cybersecurity. 1.112 violent cases clearance rates. We've heard a lot of conversations in the community regarding the clearance rates. And those are some things that perhaps this committee can give some direction on. There are some different thoughts about the UCR and those clearance rates, and comparing apples to oranges regarding that. The baseline is 34.2, our target is 43.5, and we are currently at 36.4 as far as clearance rates. And I wanna say that is the clearance rate of violent crimes, which is murder, rapes, robberies, and ag assault specifically. And that is a 5-year long average. The next performance measure, and we're almost done, 1.23, feeling of safety in parks. I don't know anyone on this call who hasn't heard recent conversations regarding the safety in our parks. This is a major priority for our community. We've been having long conversations. So looking at neighborhood and parks, we broke it down, not just to know neighborhood parks, but we want to know our city has so many parks, neighborhoods, city parks, desert parks. And not only that, but we recognize that sometimes as humans, we feel more comfortable during the day than we do in the evening. But both those things are very important to us as city officials and as city staff. So we need to know the more data we have, the better we are to deploy services in those specific areas. So just looking at, once again, the police department wanted to reach a high target. It is top 10%. They didn't just set the national average. So the top 10% of all cities, if you wanted to be in the top 10% of national cities, you would have to be 88% or higher of feeling of safety. So just in the neighborhood parks, and that would be like Corbell Park, Daly Park, 74.7 was the baseline. The target, once again, is 88. And then looking at currently, we're at 76. And I'm not going to go through all of them because you can read them yourself, and I want to make sure to give enough time to our police department. But looking at this, we know there's some area for improvement. So that's the conversation we should be having. Police body worn camera. That is one of the things actually our police department started looking at a few years ago, of having body worn camera on every officers. I think some police departments now are mandating it. We've started that years ago, but more importantly, we wanted to know, look at how the police department measures the compliance rate with using the body worn camera. And we know that we need to create muscle memory in order to remember to activate those things. And once again, that builds trust. It builds trust for our community when that happens. So looking at body activation, body worn camera activation for our department and our officers, looking at the baseline was 71% when we first started measuring. We wanted to make sure at 90% of our force activated their body worn camera, and we're currently at 76. And lastly, the police trust score, which is probably the reason why we're all here. We need to build the trust. And baseline is at 69, and target is being 80 or above. The national average is 78, and we're currently at 71. So as Rob Ferraro said, and our chief Glover said, opportunities, and they're open for opportunities, ways to increase and move those needles.
Thank you, Rosa. Do you want to give the group, I know that in chat we have a lot of information that we'll also address, but wanted to see if we could do another reflection and a hands up in regards to what data most captured your attention. So I'm going to try to go back to my screen view here and see which hands might be raised in regards to being able to comment on the data that captures your attention, or if you have questions about the performance measures that we might be able to address in future sessions with you.
And based on the chat, I just wanted to reiterate that the information, we can provide more information regarding the community survey and whatever we hear today that would be helpful in subsequent meetings.
Thank you. So I will start with, let's see here. I will start with Genevieve, please.
Thank you. Sorry, it took me a second.
That's okay. If I could, or well, go ahead. Sorry.
No. So the question I had asked in the chat was regarding drill down information for each data set regarding demographics, samples, sample and response sizes. Also super, I mean, I understand the performance measures. I don't think it's very clear from what we saw here or on the Open Tempe site about all the sources of data. How is the disparate data gathered? Where is it put into a data warehouse? What type of governance plan exists? So we see a lot of, I think a lot of us are used to seeing dashboards, particularly during COVID, and data governance can make or break what that looks like, right? It can say, well, we only need to capture this type of information for this time period and these sources. And so I'd be really interested to see the governance around that process to make sure it's equitable, to make sure that it's observable to folks beyond, you know, maybe city employees or our elected officials, having that transparent process. Sorry, I'm the nerd when it comes to technology stuff, but that type of thing I think is needs to be understood so that there's trust in the data.
Okay. And just not responding to your question, but I do want to remind people that on Rosa's presentation, we do have the URL, the performance.tempe.gov. I'll put it in the chat as well. And that is where you can see additional data sets in regards to the city as well as to the PD. I'm looking for other questions, or actually not questions, but what data most captures your attention?
John has his hand up.
Thank you. John? And then we'll go to Jacob Moore.
I just wanted to comment on the last data point, which is trust in police, which kind of surprised me. And I'm interested to hear from the chief and assistant chief as to what their thoughts are about trust in police and why we don't have as much as we should. And of course, we'll be looking at how we can build that trust through this process, I'm sure.
Thank you. And Jacob has his hands up, so we'll go to Jacob and then Roy.
Sure. I think similar to the last question is that the survey is somewhat of a snapshot of the current status. And, you know, is there longitudinal data, or even for the chief, you know, assistant chief, have some sense of the trend? We know that we're in an interesting and unique time in a number of ways. And I would imagine that as you talked about moving the needle, you know, some have gotten better, some have gotten worse. But what are the trends on some of these data points?
Okay, thank you. And then Roy, and then let's put her hand down. Michael Soto.
I would also like to address, and I put it in the chat, to analyze the dispatch training and the communication that they have. They are pretty much the first line of defense, I guess, when somebody calls the police. But we do know that 911 has been weaponized against people of color, Black men in particular, or groups of Black people when someone doesn't feel safe. So that's why and then this goes to my next point, the feel safe conversation is problematic because there are some people that feel that when somebody who is different is present, they don't feel safe. So I want us to be able to understand what's being said and how things are being heard, because the feel safe conversation, I would say, is definitely subjective, being based on who you are and where you are. I mean, thinking about now, the staff were asked to leave because people didn't feel safe because a group of police officers walked in and they got offended. So I think the feel safe, and hopefully we're not making decisions based on feelings. We make decisions based on data and statistics. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Roy. Michael Soto and then Jacob Rayford.
I'm curious on the feeling safe part of the survey. Why wasn't data collected about our residents who are worried about experiencing violence from the police, from the city police, or from the city as an institution? That seems like a really important metric that was missed.
And we'll move to Jacob Rayford.
This is more of a question. How was this information broken down based off the demographics? This is aggregated data, and I feel like there's other individuals who are asking similar questions in the chat box. But how is this information determined? And is there a way we can look at this information one-on-one in terms of the actual demographics?
Thank you. And Raquel, please.
So I know there have been a lot of comments in the chat box related to disaggregating the data so that there's a better understanding of actually who's answered and who hasn't answered. I'm also very interested in very much clearly understanding who created these indicators for success. A police presence for me is not necessarily an indicator of safety, but it could be for somebody else. And I think just understanding where those ideas, because they are ideas, actually exist in our community from neighborhood to neighborhood, zip code, all the ways that you disaggregate data, it could be really helpful for the city in thinking about how they, I would like to even have us think bigger than building public safety, build authentic community.
Thank you. And Genevieve, and then Janelle.
Thank you. One more for me, please. The other thought that I had was kind of the so what at the end of it, right? So we have this data point. We're not meeting a certain measurement or criteria, arbitrary though it might be, and then what? So if members of the community don't feel safe, then what? What's the contingency or the mitigation plan around it? I didn't see where some of that was in play, and I'm also curious about whether predictive analytics are used anywhere around. We see this type of trending data going in this area or for this officer. I don't know if that's used internally for an individual officer by officer basis, but having some predictive measures and outcomes around that to have some mitigation plans in place was another question I had.
Thank you. And Janelle?
Yes, one of the things I didn't see, and maybe someone said this, was when we talked about victim of crime, we didn't see anything about any victims of police brutality and what they're tracking on that as far as the complaints that have come forth for that. That not only is applicable to the actual individual, but also to the family, because the family has faced also some victimization. And so those are the things that I don't see there of how it's impacting the families and the trauma that it causes. So I'd like to see some sort of measurement on, when people do complain that they've had some negative interactions with our police officers, how's that being tracked? How are we resolving those things? Were they resolved? The time it took, these types of things. So I'd like to see that.
Thank you, Janelle. And then we'll move to Randy.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off of what Janelle is saying too, some of these numbers, not just are there obviously people behind them, but there's other negative externalities associated with them. And I'd be curious about how to measure that, right? So if you're not feeling as if you can trust the police, perhaps this year you don't go and vote because there's a police officer that is outside the station. Perhaps you don't go to civically participate. Perhaps you don't want to go into the grocery store that day. Perhaps you cannot do well in school as a young child of color because there are police officers there. So I would just like to add kind of this more holistic view to it. And I'd be curious about the data collection that would be valuable to the city and to our work behind that. That's obviously a very complicated piece, but there are so many different ways that this impacts people. They lose sleep, their mental health suffers. Maybe they can't go to work. Maybe they lose their job. I mean, personally, when I had, police violence happen to me, I could not sleep for weeks. I could not go outside. I was not well. And I still have to deal with that. So just thinking about as the data collection piece of what that looks like and how it actually impacts people will be very valuable long-term.
Thank you for that. And are there any other questions? I'm not seeing other hands in chat. I'm looking for those on screen as best I can. And okay, thank you for that. So thank you, Lisa, for doing all of the tech and writing for us on this one.
Excuse me, I had a question. It's Lauren.
Oh, sure. Sorry,
I know there are a
Lauren.
lot of really good points being made in the chat. Are they going to be incorporated into the notes as well as the raised hand verbal questions?
Yes, ma'am. We'll incorporate those, and all the data that we are gathering in the chat will also be able to incorporate as we move through each of our sessions. So, okay, so with that, we're going to talk a little bit about your data. When the mayor sent you the invitation letter, you were kind enough to complete actually 2 surveys. One was for your contact information, and the other survey was a pre-workshop survey. And that helped to inform our session today. So we did use the data and act upon it. There were 3 key questions in regards to your confidence and understanding and knowledge about various police-related topics and elements. And then we also asked about what you wanted to achieve through your participation in the group. And I think a lot of you articulated that during our introductions. And then we also wanted to get an idea and additional data on what a trustful, accountable relationship between the community and police look like, and if that, what would we see in place if it existed, and then what's missing that's not in place. And we'll be able to share with you the full report of that. Wanted to give you some quick highlights that inform today's presentation that Assistant Chief will be conducting in a moment. And we did see definitely there were some opportunities for information. The quickest way to read this slide is that the less green means that or green means that there is a confidence in the understanding and knowledge of. And I personally interpret that as you feel that you have enough information or you have information. You'll notice that most of the scores weren't very strong. So that tells us that we certainly have an opportunity to share information in various ways with you, as well as on a variety of topics. So some of the first topics was mental health of officers. That led the items of priority, perhaps, and also in regards to public-facing data. We could probably see that from our most robust chat and note-taking in the last section of our presentation tonight. And then the treatment of people when officers are interacting with those with mental health challenges, weapons and use, police training, and body-worn cameras. And I also think tonight we're going to be able to have some time to get into homelessness in regards to what Assistant Chief Pooley presents tonight. So wanted to kind of give you a snapshot of your data and where it comes from in regards to what we saw when we just did a strict analysis of the multiple choice question that you had. Now, as you all know, in working with data, we get to what we call that unstructured data. So it's just those open-ended comments. And so on the left here is a word cloud, which basically just shows you the frequency of words that were utilized in your comments. But I was able to go through and do an analysis, which when you get the report, you may see in a different light. But there were a few emerging themes in regards to engagement, planning, community, and points of view when you answered the question about what you wanted to achieve through your participation in this group. And any mistakes in that analysis are my own. And again, I would encourage you to read what your fellow advisory task force members said in that when we send that report to you. And then finally, your other question was about what does it look like? That's one of the questions, you know, it's similar to purpose and so what, we also say, well, what would that look like? And some of the emerging themes were about connection and competence and visibility and shifting models and resources. And so that was kind of the takeaway in regards to inform the presentation that's coming up next. So with that, I do want to check in with you and see if we would want to take a 5-minute break. I'm going to do a little tech check here. If you'd like a break, let's go ahead and we can turn off our cameras, and we'll be back at 5:51. And at that point, we will hear from Assistant Chief Mike Pooley and Interim Chief Jeff Glover. We'll see you in a few minutes. Thank you. Well, we're back on, and I will invite Assistant Chief Mike Pooley to provide his presentation for the evening.
All right, hopefully everybody's back and got to stretch a little bit. Again, hey, I'm excited to be here. I enjoy listening to everybody's input and hearing what you have to say. I've been taking a lot of notes myself on things that I really want to try to help bring some clarity and also help you to understand a little bit more about where we're coming from. But at the same time, looking at things that we can do to improve our relationship with the community. So Wydell, you're going to move the slides, right?
Yes, sir, I am.
All right. So one of the things that brings us here is obviously we had this survey that was put out. One of the things that we're going to try to do is we're going to key on a few of the specific items that were brought up. There is a lot of information that we're not going to be able to share all tonight. And I really wish I could answer a lot of the questions, but I won't be able to. But I can promise you we will be back with answers if we aren't able to answer whatever questions are coming up in your mind tonight. We know that there are things that we can do better. And like I said at the beginning of my presentation, we know we're not a perfect organization. We know that there are things that we have to do better there to build trust, to strengthen our relationship with the community. But there are a lot of things that I hope I can present that you help understand how we do our job. And I'll tell you, when I first was interested in becoming a police officer, my dad did not want me to be one. He said, hey, I don't want you to be an officer. We didn't know any police officers, but there's some things that happened in his life that he was very did not trust the police. And ultimately I did become one. My brother then became a police officer. My younger sister became a police officer, and a lot of my younger cousins have all become police officers in law enforcement. And now when I ask my dad what he thinks about them, he couldn't be more proud of officers. And the reason why is because now he gets to know them. And I hope that this is beginning of a relationship that we can help build and work together on this. So thank you. And that being said, I'm going to go ahead and give you a brief overview of what the Tempe Police Department is. Wydell, if you can. So as you know, Tempe is about 40 square miles. Our resident population is 192,000. Our service population is about 268 to 320, depending on the makeup. So here in the police department, we have 346 sworn police officers. There are 148 professional staff, and out of the 346 officers, we have 1 chief, we have 3 assistant chiefs, we have 5 commanders, 11 lieutenants, 52 sergeants, and the rest are all police officers. Now, when you look at the makeup of our department, I can tell you just off from some of the statistics on the makeup and the racial breakup is 5% of our officers are Asian, 5% are African American, 19% are Hispanic, 73% are white, and less than 1% is Native American, which is me, and less than 1% is Pacific Islander. So that's where we're at with our breakup. In the police department, we have 3 divisions. There's the field operations, which I currently oversee, which is all the uniformed personnel. The city is broken up into 2 districts or 2 areas, which is the North Patrol, which is everything north of Broadway, and South Patrol, everything south of Broadway. Everything south of Broadway is worked out of our Hardy substation off of Hardy and Elliott, and everything north of Broadway is worked out of our Apache substation off of Apache and McClintock. We have also within field operations is our Metro, which includes all of our downtown area, our traffic unit, K9, our gang unit, our school resource officers, special events, and threat mitigation, and a few other things as well. So that is, those are the 3 areas within field operations. The next bureau or division is our investigations division, which includes all of our criminal investigations, all of our detectives, as well as our special investigations. It also includes our professional standards that oversees all of the complaints or internal affairs. We also, within our investigations division, is our training unit and our hiring unit, and I'll get you some information on that as well tonight. Support services is our third division. Our support services includes all of our communications, our records, our technology, budget, and detention. So on average, last year, in 2018, we took a total of 138,617 calls for service. Now those are broken up into officer generated calls for service, where if an officer is driving and they see a violation or they see something, they break that up into the officer. We break that up into the officer involved, officer generated call for service. The other part in 2018 was 89,891 calls for service. Those are calls that come into our dispatch center, 911 calls, non-emergency. In 2019, decreased, our total calls for service decreased to 136,803. So one of the things that we really look at though is our UCR Part 1 crimes. So, and we'll get more into what a UCR Part 1 crime is, but basically those are what the FBI measures on crime within a city. So Part 1 offenses are homicide, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, arson, human trafficking, and human trafficking involuntary servitude. So I'll get more into that, I promise, just so you can understand that a little bit better. And again, I'm hoping that we can get you guys some information where you can actually read through some of this and get a little better understanding of it. So last year in 2019, out of all the crimes that were reported, can you go back still, Wydell?
Sure, my apologies.
So in 2019, we had 7,431 Part 1 property crimes. So that could be, like I said, anything from a burglary, motor vehicle theft, larceny. Those are all the property crimes. And in 2019, we had 891 violent crimes that would be reported under the FBI Unified Crime Report, as that could be anything from homicide, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, and human trafficking. So those are some things that just some real basic understanding of the breakup of the department. So if you want to go on to the next slide, and again, as we start getting into this, I'm hoping this generates questions. So when we come back the next time, we can have a better, more clear presentation. So we'll talk about hiring. Hiring is where we start the culture of our department. We look for the most qualified candidate that is going to spend the next 25 years or more serving the Tempe community. Many of our officers apply to multiple agencies, and they usually go to the first one that makes an offer. So we have to be quick when we find a good applicant, because we're all going for the same applicants, which is why it's critical we have a quick and easy process, but at the same time, a thorough background goes into it. So I'm going to explain that a little bit. So if you look at, this is the information from 2019. Last year, we had 629 people that qualified to test for the police department. Out of the 629 that applied, 204 showed up to take the test. Out of the 204 that took the test, 155 of them passed it. The 98 went to background, and from 98 it whittled down to 60, which took polygraphs. 30 went to roundtable, which is basically where we go and we talk about each applicant, see who would fit best into the organization. And from that 30, we decided that only 14 people would be hired. So in 2019, only 2% of the candidates that applied for the police department were hired into the agency. Less than 4% only made it to background. So some of the disqualifiers that where, and I hope that this generates some discussion later on. Some of the disqualifiers, when we look at who we want to hire and who we can hire, there's some disqualifiers that kind of who oversees the certifications for the police department is a group called Arizona Police Officer and Standards and Training. So Arizona Post, AZ Post is what I'll refer to them as. They say that there are certain things that you cannot have in your background that would prohibit you from being a police officer. And as we get more into this information, we can get that information to you to help you see who is and who isn't qualified to be a police officer. So let's go to our training. Okay, so moving from our hiring, when we hire a police officer, like I said, it's a grueling process. We hold about 5 tests a year. Gone are the days when we used to be able to hold 1 or 2 tests the year, and we'd get several applicants that would give us plenty of officers or plenty of applicants to choose from. Now, because we're seeing numbers go down, we're seeing less people that are interested in being police officers, especially this year, go down. We're trying to hold as many more testing processes as possible. When we hire an officer, they go to a 12-week pre-academy. Now, some of the things I want to really, one of the things that I really want you to understand with the pre-academy, this is where we help the new recruits to understand what it is to be a police officer. Some of the things that we do is just the criminal law and all that, but one of the most important things is we really get them involved in the community. We do service projects. We let them get out there, meet people, and we have them within the first 2 weeks of them coming in, they're out, whether it's pulling someone's weeds or helping someone move. We're helping them to get out to understand that being a police officer is being a servant of the community. The academy is a 24-week academy. We currently use the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office Academy. There's other academies that we have used, the Phoenix Police Academy. We've also used the Mesa Academy, but from what we're seeing and what we've observed, that Maricopa County Sheriff's Office has one of the better academies that fits with who we want our officers to be. It's, like I said, a 24-week academy, and we currently have 5 recruits out there right now that are going to graduate here in the next month. After they graduate the academy, they go into a post academy, which is 5 weeks long. This includes understanding what Tempe is, a little bit more about Tempe specific, and then they go into an FTO, or a field training officer phase, where they're paired with a field training officer. The FTO, the field training officer, to be selected to be a field training officer, you have to go through a rigorous testing process to make sure you are not only qualified, but you have the demeanor and qualities we want you to train our new officers. The field training is probably one of the most important and most critical positions in our department, because it's the first taste of what it's like to be a police officer here in the city of Tempe. We have a pretty grueling testing process to become a field training officer. And we have 3 different field training officers that evaluate a new hire, a new recruit that just graduated the academy. After they finish that, they're assigned to a patrol squad, and where they're on probation for 52 weeks.
Hey, Mike, let me interject really quick on this portion that you're in. Just to clarify for everybody, in the pre-academy phase, there's a typo there for 12 weeks. We don't keep them in pre-academy for 12 weeks. It's only a 2-week phase. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that process for pre-academy is not that long. And just one additional thing with the FTO process is that it is a national standardized process that field training officers go through, that teaches them everything about how to evaluate and be able to conduct proper evaluations really of the people that they're training, because they're being socialized into this profession, and you want them to come in the right way and to be able to be professional, and to your field training officers are really teaching your recruits that are coming in about professionalism, about how to provide that public service. And so it's imperative that we have the right people in place to be able to teach that and to show that behavior and model the behavior. So didn't mean to interrupt, but just wanted to make sure that we had that correct in there, Mike.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it. Yeah, you're right. Thanks for catching that. It is 2 weeks. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, Wydell. So again, going on to training, and I know there's going to be a lot of questions about training. And again, I'm trying to generate some ideas so you guys can ask us, and hopefully we'll be able to respond. After an officer is done with the hiring process, the pre-academy, the academy, post-academy, they go on and hopefully they have a very successful career. One of the things here in the Tempe Police Department that we do is do what's considered advanced officer training. We have at least 2 days a year where they get specific training on skill development, on life-saving techniques, any kind of defensive tactics, decision-making, firearm qualifications. We do a lot of judgmental and decision-making. We teach them about less lethal. Here's where we'll do a lot of technology stuff as well, working with people suffering mental illness. And I'll get into some of that here in a few minutes. But our advanced officer training, we have a training unit that consists of a lieutenant, a sergeant, 3 officers that go out and they're looking at what are things that are happening around the country, what are things that need to come into Tempe, what are things that we're seeing in Tempe, and what can we do to address issues, to teach our officers the appropriate way to do things. Let's go to the next slide. So talking about our supervisor training, again, our officers get quite a bit of training, and the next couple slides will explain a little bit more of what we do. The supervisors for us are our frontline supervisors, our line level supervisors is one of the most important positions that we have. These are the supervisors that are watching and creating the culture and creating the attitudes that we need out on the streets. For them, we give them additional training where we teach them about internal affairs investigations. We teach them about human resources and the things that they need to do to make sure their officers are staying up current on things. We give them legal updates. We have positions where every supervisor that is supervising an employee will have to go through this training to make sure that their officers are being taken care of and that the officer wellness is a big deal. Go ahead and go to the next slide for me. All right, so let me talk about what Arizona Post. Now, if you remember, the Arizona Post is who oversees certifications for police officers. What they require, the only thing they require is 8 hours of proficiency training. Proficiency training is training on techniques, tools, and equipment of police work. So they require every year for every officer to go through at least 8 hours of training on this. For continual training, which is professional development and current trend training, the only thing that Post requires is 8 hours every 3 years on this. So some of the things that you see is, if you look at those bullet points of the continual training and proficiency training, we do a lot of advanced investigation work. We do decision-making, community interactions, supervisor training, active shooter, and just understanding what it is that the job entails. And as you know, the training changes every year. There's something that comes up that we're trying to help our officers to be the best trained officers that we can be. Can you go to the next slide, Wydell?
Sure.
So again, remember Arizona Post requires only 8 hours of proficiency training and 8 hours every 3 years of continual training. This is just a snapshot of what 2018 looks like. So for us, our continuing training, we had 13 and a half hours and we had 5 hours of proficiency training. That list is a list of all the training that all of our officers got. In 2019, again, we had 11.25 hours of continuing training and 3.5 hours of proficiency training. Now, those are required by us that we make sure every officer goes to and attends. On top of that, other trainings that we have are given through our training unit on trends that are happening, de-escalation training, training that comes out from different national organizations that we send out through our briefings or roll calls, some people will call them. And if you want to go to, so some of the training that we have had reference bias and racial injustice trainings are, we've had in 2017, I believe, was the last training we had where it was, hold on, I apologize. Fair and impartial police training. We've also had training on dementia, training on behavioral health, training on deaf awareness. We've also had training on crisis intervention training as well. Wydell, are we missing a slide?
Let's see here. De-escalation.
So one of the things I wanted to hit on as well is Tempe Police Department received a $700,000 grant funded through Bureau of Justice Assistance, Strategies for Policing Innovation to study de-escalation. We partnered with ASU for the 3-year grant to study de-escalation, the perceptions of de-escalation, techniques of de-escalation, training and effectiveness on de-escalation. The study has already yielded a peer-reviewed paper, 2 separate conference appearances, and 3 different presentations. So we worked with Dr. Michael White in doing the research, and this is very, very recent. So this training is a 10-hour curriculum developed in partnership with ASU. Some ASU researchers helped us, as well as Tempe PD utilized study information. We went to outside agencies. We looked at SMART practices. We looked at things that were specific to the Tempe community. The final curriculum included introduction to what we call the patrol model. It was modified from the LAPD model that they use, and it looks at our training that we created, looks at stress in the body, our critical incident stress management. One of the things that ASU really brought to us was emotional intelligence and active listening, and we incorporated that into this de-escalation training. Operational patrol application, scenario-based patrol, and patrol debriefing. So when we look at that right side of the slide, patrol is, it's an acronym for planning, assessment, time, redeployment, looking at what other resources there are, and lastly, well, most importantly, is lines of communications. So at the end of August, just this past August, a full 6 months of data have been collected on half of our field operations, and the de-escalation training will start to roll out to the entire police department once it's done. Now, there's some things that came out of this study. Several studies have identified that compromise is one of the biggest things that came out of this. Now, again, one of the things that we look at in training is we look at things that have been taught for many years and how we have had to develop and look at what are some things that we were maybe not doing right, or some things that we're not doing the best that we could. One of those is back many, many years ago, it was always, hey, we could never leave a scene. We could never not compromise. One of the things that we saw after we put our officers through this de-escalation training was that there was a need for our officers to be able to compromise with certain individuals. And what I mean by that is looking at other ways that they could interact with an individual. The Tempe de-escalation training incorporates officer safety as a foundational principle. The training's focus on officer safety appears to have translated into greater use of tactics designed to reduce risk to officers and, most importantly, also the citizens. Some of the things that we've seen is that there are other agencies now that are looking to see what it is that we have done for our de-escalation, that we have implemented, and we're currently working with the Attorney General's Office of the state of Ohio to see how they can incorporate some of the things that we've taught in our de-escalation training with the law enforcement out there as well. Currently, we are going to be implementing this current de-escalation training into our entire department. Because of the research project and the research that was being done on it, we only implemented it into half of our field operations. Let's see. And they are currently finishing the research on that. And that research should be concluded hopefully here within the next month or two, that I will make sure to share with everyone on this group as well. Let's go to the next slide, Wydell.
Okay. Just because Assistant Chief has a lot of information in the presentation, I wanted to take a pause here. As we've talked a lot about training, de-escalation, officer recruitment. There's been a lot of activity in the chat as well, so we'll be capturing that. But what in this presentation, we'll do this like we did previously, gives you hope, and what causes perhaps hesitation or concern. And if there's a question you would like to see addressed in future events, we can also include that. So feel free to include that in chat, or please raise your hand and we will call on you. So we're looking for cautions and hopes as well as future event questions. And I'm going through our list here to see who's raised their hand. And I'll start with Arlene. Thank you.
Thanks, Wydell. A couple of notes as Assistant Chief Pooley is sharing information. Back to the training module, I think, and I'm seeing it in the chat also with my colleagues. How is recruitment conducted? Where is recruitment conducted? And he made a statement from the pool. They find who we want our officers to be. Well, what is that? I'd like to hear what that definition is. And with training, is that it? That 8 hours or 8 hours every 3 years? Because I'm looking at an opportunity for an increase in continual training required, but I wouldn't know what yet. So I think more knowledge about that. And also definitely that de-escalation grant, what information was gained and what training was developed as a result of that study. I'm complete.
Thank you, Arlene. And we will move to Viri and then Jacob, followed by Genevieve.
Hi, Al. I put it on the chat. A major concern is the training coming from MCSO. MCSO has a history of racist and violent practices, several lawsuits as well. And so we know that I know that through the consent decree, there were several mandates that have been getting applied and shifted, and, training has been changed. But there's also was like a recent study that showed that a lot of these practices continue even under new leadership. So concerns about MCSO, and then also echoing what Michael Soto shared, there's also a lot of horrific practices in terms of working and with trans community and how they book and disrespect the trans community and LGBTQ community. Have experienced that a lot through cases. So that's a major concern. Training. Oh, so training. Yeah. So the use of force, it would be great to know the comparison between the use of force time and de-escalation. How much time do we spend training on weapons versus how much time do we spend not doing that? And being able to have that in comparison. I know that there's a lot of trainings that usually don't have a measurement and a follow-up, so would be interested in knowing what some of the evaluation practices for some of those trainings. And I know that it's also holistic, like there's, you can't say this one training helped this one issue, but thinking through what are you looking at when you're looking at training. And I think someone else mentioned it, right? Like the follow-up to reinforce those practices, or for example, in Phoenix Police, they did a bias training, and in that initial, right, there was data that showed that officers had negative thoughts when they saw a Black man be portrayed, and then there was like no follow-up to, well, what happens now, right? Like, because they're still out in the streets with that. So really looking for that follow-up support. And then I think just hope. It's like, I'm glad that we're here and talking about this, and it looks like there's been a lot of measurements tried, or a lot of data points being pulled. I think being able to shift those to what are we trying to measure? And for me, it's the reduction of police brutality. So I think thinking through like, what are we actually measuring? But I'm glad that there is initial data points to start looking into deeper.
Great. Thank you, Vieri. We'll go to Jacob Rayford and then Genevieve, please.
All right, so I have similar sentiments as everyone who had spoken prior, as well as what Arlene was saying about the training methods and how I think it was 8 hours every 3 years. I don't think that is anywhere near adequate enough. In regards to training and things of that nature, I did see something about behavioral health only being 4 hours. Correct me if I'm wrong there. Also, for training, is there anything that deals with individuals working in different cultural communities? And how would that training go about in order to understand how these communities work, as opposed to just stepping in and having this feeling of overreach in communities that they're not a part of? So how would that go about, and is there any training for that?
Thank you. And we'll move to Genevieve and then Janelle.
Thank you. So I'll start with hope. I definitely like the direction of going beyond best practices. I think we can probably agree that if we're in a period of change, we have to go beyond best practices. We need a whole new set of practices. So that is definitely a direction I think we should continue heading in. Several things give me hesitation and concern. I'm certainly looking, as has been mentioned, those behavior changes. How are you measuring those? Anywhere from 50 to 90% of adult learning is lost within four weeks of that training taking place. So what reinforcement is happening? Are there performance measures put into place to say, this is now how we're expecting you to behave and perform, and the actions we're expecting you to take? And if you don't, what's the performance improvement plan from there? Similarly, I made mention of this, but there's some conversation I saw on, or some metrics that I saw, and I'll need to pour into it a little bit more, but that disability training, there have been a number of high profile shootings of disabled youth where you can't see their disability, you don't know that they're disabled, and body movements or things like that are being misinterpreted as aggression, and very it's a very concerning topic for people in the disability community. So that's another one that is concerning to me, that we're not having more emphasis on that. I'd also be interested to know if any of that is monitored, like, because that's multiple public safety people, right? Do you know what happens to someone with sensory disorders that or disabilities when you bang on the door, right? They're not going to come help you. They're going to go run and hide. So that's that kind of thing, I think, is really missing and really concerning. As a parent of a disabled child, I think it's really, really important. Also super thoughtful about unconscious and implicit bias, what's happening to identify that and mitigate that. And then badged versus non-badged training. So if we have this idea where we have non-violent calls that officers are called out to, how can we disassociate or decouple badged officers with, firearms going out to a non-violent call? So I'm interested to see the differences between those two. And I'm complete with you.
Thank you. And Janelle?
Yes, I'll start with the hope. I'm glad that we are all here having this conversation. It's time to have this dialogue. And so I'm hopeful that we will come to the solutions that we need and the consensus towards those solutions. The things that give me pause and concern, I echo what my peers have stated. I also did not see anything on stress inoculation. How do we deal with stress, especially with our officers? Because if they are stressed and having personal issues, that they're going to take that out on the community, especially if they have a bias, an unconscious bias towards a particular community. They walk in a space and they see someone who's taller than them, who doesn't look like them, and they already have a bias. That's going to raise their stress levels. What are we doing about that? How are we measuring that? And how are we helping them with that type of training? So I think there should be something in there about stress inoculation or something. Ethics, they definitely need a lot more ethics training and professionalism training, more so than 3 years, and moral authority. What does that look like? I didn't see that in there because we're dealing with some moral issues as relates to how I am watching them enter into spaces with our community. So those are the things I'd like to see in the future in our conversations and the things that we need to address.
Great. Thank you very much. We'll move to Dr. Adler Tapia, then Randy, and then followed by Melody.
Well, first I'm going to say I'm a mom of 3, and just so some of you don't know me, my husband is on the Human Relations Commission. He's a Mexican immigrant. So I'm the mother of raised 3 children and was afraid, especially for my husband, going out when Sheriff Arpaio was in office especially. So just to preface that, and I'm a longtime Tempe resident, but I am from the East Coast, and I find policing very different here than what I experienced in the East Coast. And so I think all of this is amazing. I am a little nervous about saying anything because I don't feel safe yet in this community to say anything, because I feel like if I talk about my work with public safety, I might get dumped on. So I am going to share that with you. But I think one of the things that keeps coming up is all this training. And this amount of training, when I added up all the recommendations, is a bachelor's degree. And so I think that's one of the things we have to look at. Do we know about who applies? What the data I have is most of the law enforcement officers in Tempe are more likely to be educated than officers in other communities. And I do work with officers all over the world. And so looking at, do we want police is the first question. And if we do, are we willing to pay to train them to have the expertise? Or do we need to look at paying to have other types of services in the community? Rosa and Chelsea and I met. My husband was part of Tempe Social Services and creating Care 7 in Tempe. If you don't know about Care 7, responds at the request of PD. And my daughter volunteered with Tempe Care 7 and then volunteered as an ASU grad student in counseling at the Tempe program. And yet we don't fund it. We don't fund those counseling programs. We only give 3 sessions per person referred to Tempe Social Services. So we have to be willing to fund these services. And so I think asking police officers to do all of this, I think we're asking too much. We can't expect them to basically have a PhD in human behavior and also have their life on the line and be threatened. And we talk about weapons, and we have to look at those other things. And I think everybody's saying amazing stuff, but I can just feel my heart pounding louder and louder, because I would not want my son to be a police officer right now, because It's scary. And we have to look at what makes these officers feel in danger. How much of it is actually rooted in threat? And how do we make a good police officer? If we want one, how do we get a good one and keep a good one when they're going to be paid so much more in the private sector? And I thank all the officers on here for the willingness to do this. I really appreciate and respect your service in this. And Chief, it's great to see you in that position. But we have to look at, what can we do, and what are we willing to fund? And I think Tempe needs to be willing to put their money, not cut back social services worse now than they were 20 years ago, but look at providing services and training. But we can't, this many hours of training is not going to be in a police budget, and there's not going to be time to take them off the streets to do the training. We have to have more officers to cover. Like my part of South Tempe, there's maybe 1 or 2 officers on duty at any point in time. So, we have to look at coverage. Do we want them? What do we want them for? And are we willing to train them to react the way we want them to react? And that's kind of what I hear is we want more for less, and we have to be willing to invest in community services first. So we don't need the police officers to respond to these kind of calls, that dispatchers can send them to other places, just like I saw in Australia, where the dispatchers can actually do some kind of clearance to send them a different way and say, this is not a police issue, this is a mental health crisis team. And I did spend 2 years dispatching with PD as a crisis worker, as a therapist on the East Coast. So looking at, can we work together, community mental health, but we have to be safe too. I can't imagine, most of the shootings I do debriefings on happen in less than 30 seconds. So we have to figure out a way, how can we be involved and prevent that in the first place? Let's never let it get to where we have so many people in so much pain with drugs and alcohol and addiction and mental illness that officers shouldn't be having to respond to those calls. So you can tell my passion is about, let's get police doing what police should do, but not doing what we need community people to do, and mental health and addiction specialists and all that. We should never get to where officers have to be mental health social workers, addictions management, all of that. So thank you for listening to my passion about that. I am the granddaughter and great-granddaughter of police officers and veterans. And I do see the pain in my office of what officers go through. I did sit on the Phoenix subcommittee for officer suicide and the state subcommittee for the Craig, that ended up with the Craig Tiger bill. We need to prevent the trauma in law enforcement. But let's imagine, and I talked to a graduate class from Widener this morning, let's imagine you just went on a call for a dead baby. But you can't leave duty. You have to go on to the next call and the next call and the next call. And I think we have to look at the trauma load that officers are carrying, and we have to have a way to make sure that they don't carry that to the next call. But if you're on a 10-hour shift and you've been on patrol or sex crimes, how do you go call to call to call and keep all this straight in your head? I know I can't do it, and I'm trained in this. So I hear a lot of good ideas, and I hear frustration and anger and urgency, and I agree with all of it. But let's look at what are we willing to do to have the best, safest community where people feel safe and are safe. And we might have to be brave on this committee to take some of that action. So thanks for listening to my passion about that.
Thank you. And we have a couple more hands up, and then that will wrap up our reflection. Randy, followed by Melody, and then Viri.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off that, I think bravery is the theme of all these conversations that we have to have. But in order to be brave, I think you have to go a little bit of a step further and say, why, to answer the earlier question, like, why do police exist, right? Like, just putting it on the table, right? Like, why? And if it's about safety, how do we redefine safety? To go to the example that was made earlier, why is that child in danger or deceased in the first place, right? Was it a lack of investment in those community programs, right? If we're investing in those community programs, naturally the give and take has to be that there's less police on the streets, because not only are they not needed for these services anymore, people are safer in the first place, they're not committing crime out of poverty or desperation or whatever that might be. So just to kind of name, like, those are the steps that have to continue to be moved on to actually lean into that bravery that you're talking about, which I really value. So thank you for uplifting that point. To this, just to kind of sit in this kind of box that you guys gave us over here with the hope, I think it's valuable that we're getting this kind of information from police. I think maybe a few years ago, police would not have sat with us to share this kind of information about the trainings that they go through. But I think that's because, you know, police know the pressure and accountability that they have for the first time in a long time, and that we're not going to wait much longer for these kind of really steep and systemic reforms. I think it's highly concerning how much training these police have to go through because they're doing all those different things in the first place, because they shouldn't be in those situations, right? And those situations should not exist because we're actually making those kind of investments and putting people first, right? Not people with badges and guns. We're putting people first and investing in them with the resources that we give to the city and our community. So I just wanted to uplift that. And I think this is just the fundamental question that we'll grapple with. I think it's going to take longer than 6 sessions. I think it's going to take longer than 2.5 months. Just putting that on the table, when I got that for the first time, I was like, there's no way we figure this out by December. I think that's okay, right? I think this is a conversation that we care about, and it's very robust and deep and difficult for a lot of different people. It's difficult to be in this space in general as a person of color. So just kind of uplifting that. And I guess the last thing would be looking at all this training, looking at all the money that's going into training. We've been talking about training for a long time. I've very, very long time been talking about we just need better training, more training, and everything will be okay. And maybe it's time that we're training less people, right? And we're putting that money where our mouth is, into housing and homelessness services, mental health, et cetera. So I'll stop there, but that's some of the thoughts that I had. So thank you.
Thanks, Randy. And we'll wrap this up with one last comment, and that'll be from Melanie Elkin.
Thank you. So I just had a couple thoughts and questions in regard to recruiting. I'm curious if the police department has a focus on recruiting officers that are a reflection of the communities that they serve. So if there's a specific effort to recruit representatives from the community. So based on the slide that was presented, just curious, about, it looks like about 7% of the Tempe community is a Black community. And so I'm just curious if that ratio is thought out in terms of recruitment for officers. Also curious, as Officer Pooley pointed out, that the numbers for applicants are going down, especially this year. I'm curious by how much and the reason behind that. And if the training frequency and the content of the training offered is based on funding specifically. So I'm just curious if there's a budget that is determined ahead of time of what training falls under that budget, or if there can be some shifts to enhance that training. I'm just curious how those trainings are determined, and if the need is for more, if the funding is available for that.
Well, thank you, and appreciate all of the comments and the participation. And again, Elisa, thank you for scribing. So we're going to move to the next session of Assistant Pooley's presentation, and he will start us off with public-facing data.
Wydell, I think you're missing some slides.
I think they're coming up, Mike. I think the order. Would you like me to go to this one?
Yeah. Well,
okay.
No, the officer mental health, that was supposed to be after police training.
Okay, let me go behind the scenes and see if I can locate that one for you, but I think everyone will forgive me. I'll just flick through. Sorry, Lisa?
Back to slide 5.1.
There we go, thank you.
All right, so again, I appreciate all the questions coming in, and I hope I can clarify a lot of that information because it will definitely make sense. So we're going to move on to officer mental health. This was another topic that was brought up out of the survey. PTSD is a real thing for everyone. One of the things that our officers deal with in a span of a career, they on average see about 188 critical incidents during their entire career. The average person will see up to 2 typically in their lifetime. So how does that affect our officers? It can definitely affect them. We've seen it here in Tempe. We've seen it across the country. More officers have died from suicide than line of duty deaths. One of the things that I think is good is that we have what's called the Craig-Tiger Act. Basically, this was passed into law in 2018 and provides officers up to 36 counseling sessions after experiencing a traumatic event. The intent of the Craig-Tiger Act is also to provide the best possible care to our employees who are exposed to traumatic events in the course of duty to ensure these individuals can return to work and their normal daily lives. And I believe it was Dr. Tapia kind of hit on this a little bit. With these services available, the goal is to address and treat mental health issues before they develop into PTSD or other conditions. So there's 6 criteria for the Craig-Tiger Act, and that allows these officers to get counseling sessions. And just to give you an idea of what was taken into account on what an officer may be exposed to is witnessing the death or maiming or visually witnessing the immediate aftermath of such a death or maiming of a human being, responding to or directly being involved in a criminal investigation of crimes against children, requiring rescue in the line of duty where one's own life was endangered, witnessing the death of another police officer or firefighter. So this Craig-Tiger Act, it's not just for police officers, it's also for firefighters as well. So, or responding to or being directly involved in an investigation regarding the drowning or near drowning of a child. We also have, in Tempe, we have a critical incident stress management team. This is a team that is here in Tempe. It's just a part-time team where we have officers that are trained in how to deal with critical incident stress management, how to go out to scenes and talk with officers and make sure that they are doing well. Kind of what was talked about by Dr. Tapia with if an officer experiences a critical incident, a child that dies or something that's not normal, then our critical incident stress management team or our peer support will respond and talk to the officer to see if there's things that they need. So that's a little bit about the Craig-Tiger Act. We can go to the next slide, and I could spend a whole day on officer mental health and each of these topics, but just in timing, we will continue on.
I think, Mike, with this one was about just the public-facing data, and I do know we've captured a lot of that information earlier with Rosa's presentation, but feel free to, go through this piece, please.
Okay, so just real quick, our policies are currently online. If anybody is wanting to look for those, if you go to the website, the police department website, they can go on and there's a link that will take you to that. For the use of force data, we are currently in the process of coding all of our 2020 use of force data to be reported to the FBI and to be collected as their use of data collection initiative. We will finalize this in the first quarter of 2021, and it'll all be made public, where anybody will be able to look at all use of force that's used in Tempe. Additionally, Tempe PD will report use of force data as part of their national data collection effort. And those reportable uses of force include those which result in death, loss of unconsciousness, or serious bodily injury. And I think we did talk a lot about that other stuff. So if you want to move on, Wydell, so we can get through it. All right, this one is going to be, I'm going to actually have Sergeant Rob Ferraro is going to help me with this one. But today, police officers increasingly are called upon to address a range of complex social issues, which we've talked about, such as the opioid epidemic. Officers are expected to save lives by administering naloxone to people overdosing on opioids. And in many cities, officers have significant roles in helping persons with addictions to get drug treatment and other services. Officers are also expected to de-escalate tense situations involving persons with mental illness, particularly incidents in which a mentally ill person is behaving erratically or dangerously. And in many communities, officers are being called upon to intervene and provide help to persons experiencing homelessness. So when we look at some of the mental health, some of the things that we're going to talk about is, we talked a lot about training, just some bullet points. And again, I could spend hours on just the training that we go to, what's required, and how we do a lot more than what the basic requirements are to be a police officer. So one of the other things that we're proud of is the CIT training, or crisis intervention training. This is a CIT training is the gold standard of mental health training. It's a 40-hour multifaceted discipline approach. Currently, deployment of our CIT officers is about 80%. So about 80% of our officers are in field operations are CIT trained. The amount of officers and sergeants are, let's see, hold on. One of the things that we're looking at is, one of the questions that comes up is, why isn't everyone CIT trained? What we have also is the One Mind campaign, which also deals a lot with mental health and how to respond to mental health. And lastly is the petitions. We'll get into that here. Basically what happens with a petition, and as we talk about things that police are responding to, that we agree with you. We don't think that officers need to be responding to a lot of calls for service. And I'm really hoping that we can come to an agreement on some things that maybe we can work on. One of the things is, unfortunately, is that there's legislation that there are these mental health petitions, where when these mental health petitions are signed by a judge, it orders our officers, and state law says that officers will respond to certain types of calls for service where someone's experiencing a mental health condition. There's two types of petitions, by emergent and non-emergent. Emergent is kind of like an emergency. It was authored by a member of the community, a family member, behavioral health clinic, friend, crisis worker, because the person was exhibiting three key features: a danger to themselves, self or others. Behavior was because of mental illness, and they are unwilling or unable to get treatment. So Tempe, our orders say that a patrol sergeant must review the petition in its entirety to authenticate and review any danger or threat to responding officers. Additionally, they must call the county crisis line to gather information related to the person and any pertinent information related to the danger. Once reviewed, the patrol sergeant and two officers, usually hopefully a CIT or a crisis intervention trained officer, will respond. They're dispatched in an attempt to detain the person and transport them to the evaluating agency. If not served, another attempt may be made by the agency is made aware of any potential non-service. So then there's a non-emergent petition, which are about 5% of the petitions. So if you look at that graph to the right, if you look how many our officers are responding to, just in 2019, we know that this 363 is actually an underreported number. We believe that it's significantly more that our officers have had to respond to somebody suffering a mental health crisis. Now, some of those we do feel that, hey, there is a need for us to go because of something violent that has happened or could happen. But a lot of these, many of them are being transported from one facility to another. The Narcan, actually, I'm gonna, Sergeant Ferraro, can you go ahead and explain a little bit more about CIT and One Mind and Narcan?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm not on camera. I'm chasing my 3-year-old, so I'm mobile. So just real quick, just to touch on CIT, which stands for it's Crisis Intervention Team Training, and like Assistant Chief Poole, you mentioned, it is the gold standard. That is national best practice endorsed by National Council for Behavioral Health, and fully vetted and it's really codified training. That is, like Assistant Chief Pulley said, broad. Our officers that receive that training, we really ensure that each patrol squad is covered. And so as it stands right now, every squad in the Tempe Police Department has a CIT, at least one CIT officer on that squad. Some have up to 5. And then the biggest piece of our CIT program, what we're proud of, is that it's rooted in community behavioral health. We are just a partner in this. Mercy Maricopa Integrated Care is the owner of it, and they are the regional behavioral health authority. And so we have about maybe 15 or 16 different pieces during that 40-hour training that is taught by community behavioral health, because we are not the experts. We know that, and we don't want cops up there teaching other cops about behavioral health. We want the experts up there. So we have the Urgent Psychiatric Center, we have Community Bridges, Teros, Impact, the Arizona Brain Alliance. We have many different community behavioral health partners that are teaching this discipline. So like I said, it really is the gold standard. Then just to touch on the One Mind campaign, that was envisioned by the International Association of Chiefs of Police and the National Council for Behavioral Health. And that was a pledge that departments across the country were to undertake to basically say that you needed to have a policy set forth on how you respond to folks that are in crisis in the community. You need to have partnerships with behavioral health. And then you also need to have 100% of your department trained in mental health first aid, which I'll talk about in a quick second. And so we were the first department, Tempe Police Department was the first department in the state of Arizona to take that pledge and to accomplish it. And so we did that back in 2017. And so mental health first aid is an 8-hour training. You could almost think of it like basic CPR type training, in that it's just the basics. It's the basics for officers to basically understand what a behavioral health crisis looks like, to be able to identify it, to be able to then de-escalate properly, and to be able to get that person, divert them from the criminal justice system to the behavioral health system. And so that is that standardized type training. Again, that was endorsed by National Council for Behavioral Health, and they codified it. And so there is that's a standard training that cops, that all of our cops get. And so Impact Suicide Prevention Center, located in Tempe, is responsible for doing that training for Tempe PD. And so when an officer graduates the academy, in order for us to maintain 100%, we do a training for those officers. And so they get that basic entry level type, hey, this is a behavioral health crisis. And then hopefully we get them into CIT, that more specialized type training. And so that's for the One Mind campaign. The petitions we spend an entire day talking about petitions and explaining the petition process to officers. It is highly complex. And so Assistant Chief Pulley did a good job in 45 seconds explaining that, which we take a day to explain. And then did you want me to touch on Narcan, or are you going to touch on that?
If you can hit on that.
Great. So Narcan was every department pretty much carries Narcan, which is naloxone, to reverse the opioid effects. As we know that our country is going through an opioid crisis, and Tempe has even higher numbers than the national average. And so we wanted to take a little bit more of a unique approach. We wanted to think outside the box. And so we leveraged a partnership with Impact Suicide Prevention Center. And we wrote for a $2 million SAMHSA grant, which is it's a federal agency, Substance Abuse Mental Health Service Administration. We were awarded that contract, and we have over 4 years, $2 million. So it's a partnership with Impact and Arizona State University to evaluate our program. It's not just to put Narcan in the hands of cops, but the bigger piece is to get the person, because there was a significant gap, and after Narcan was administered, to where the person was brought to the hospital, and then they were just left to be. And then they would go about their ways. And so the biggest piece of this grant that we were able to get done is that aftercare, that immediate window where the person goes to the hospital. We have a 24/7 crisis line that we set up. So if a cop administers Narcan, saves the person's life, they go to the hospital, they make a phone call. a crisis navigator will then go out to the hospital, and they will make they will interact, they will make contact with that individual, and hopefully get them engaged into resources. So we started that program back in February of this year. Our cops, we had 53 saves as of today, to date. So we've administered Narcan. I think we've administered Narcan about 55 times. 53 were effective, were reversed the effects and saved that person's life. And that's since February. About half of those individuals are engaged in resources throughout the community. Several are in inpatient residential facilities, engaged in their recovery. And so we're extremely proud of that, because that could be a precursor to how we handle other type of issues in our city, in our country, where if you have an interaction with a police officer, maybe that cop is then making a very quick handoff to an expert. And so this is something that could be replicated across the country, across many other areas, whether it's runaways or domestic violence or various other issues that we're facing across the country. So this could be a landmark type way of how we handle things. And so that is our Narcan program.
Thank you. We're going to move forward. And one of the top items was homelessness, so we'll go over this briefly.
All right, so real quick, I know we're running out of time. Homelessness is a very unique thing that we work very closely with Human Services. Our Human Services has taken the lead on homelessness. They have what's called the HOPE team, which they do a lot of the outreach. They work with the people that are suffering from homelessness to try to find them residency. They do a lot of the in-person, in-face, help them provide services. What we do is we work very close with them with our Parks officer, which was created in 2016 to really help them get to understand what is going on out there, to help coordinate the services. And lastly, if there's any crime that could be established that needs to be addressed, that's what they do. And again, I know there's a lot of information, but what I'm going to do is I wish I could get into more, but I'm sure everybody's getting overwhelmed with a lot of this information. So I'm going to turn it back over to Wydell.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Rob. We really appreciate the information. The hour is winding, so I want to just move us to another piece here, and that is our next steps. Obviously, we've had very rich discussion in the chat. I appreciate that, as well as on our reflection boards, and we will be collating that information as well, so we will be providing that. So I wanted to just go through a real quick poll that we would like to take of the groups. And again, you've seen some information tonight. We know that it's not the entire piece of this. So we have a poll that we would like to share that would ask the question that, for you, what topics do you prefer to offer your perspective about in our next live workshop? And there's several things that you can choose from. We would like for you to pick no more than 2, and feel free to elaborate in the chat. So we're asking you, would you like to hear more about community policing, transparency, timeline, and communication and incident review, police engagement with specific communities, treatment by officers with people experiencing mental health, de-escalation, policing policies, body-worn cameras. If there's a variety there, we have about 9 choices there. The 9th choice is actually other, so please feel free to type your recommendation into the chat. You can see the results as they are appearing on my screen. If somebody can give me a confirmation you're seeing this.
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, on my screen.
Okay, that's okay. I will have, we'll get that polling results to you. Right now, it looks like, from what I can tell, we're getting a lot in regards to police engagement with specific communities. In fact, we're getting about 50% there. And then our next item that is close behind And this doesn't exclude these, it just means we can help prioritize and be flexible in our process here. Then we have about 25% of you are asking about community policing, as well as policing policies have now risen to about 30% of interest in regards to body-worn cameras, use of force, and de-escalation training. So it looks like we definitely have the opportunity to take a deeper dive into other things. There 17 reporting out. Looks like 25 of you have now reported. We have a large group tonight, so we really appreciate your participation. I'll keep the poll up for a few minutes or for a moment, just in case, so you can still do that. And again, we're also looking, we've just now cleared 50% of police engagement with special populations or specific populations. So I want to move forward to our next steps. And the first thing I'd like for you to do, or one of the last things, is in the chat, reflect on this evening's session, and please let us know which picture and which image describes perhaps your reaction to all of the information and to the process and how we're working with you tonight on this to co-create that strategic plan. You know, that is really our goal here. In the chat box, describe the photo number and why. So if you're picking number 2 because it's after your dinner hour and you're feeling a little hungry, that might be the one. Or if you're feeling, you know, like we have a big challenge ahead of us, maybe you're selecting number 11. So just take a few minutes to do that in the chat. I'm getting some responses in. Okay, thank you. We had some Legos, we've had some boulders, we're off to the races. So with that, I'd like to remind you of a couple things. Our next workshop is on the 28th at 4 p.m. And then again, we will be sending you through an email from Brianne, the tech training options for November 20th and 21st. Those are scheduled for afternoon, but please feel free to reach out if that's not a time that you're able to make it. We'll schedule some other options for you. And before we close tonight, I would like to turn it back to Rosa and Chelsea from the Strategic Management Diversity Office.
I just wanted to take a few moments to say thank you. And I think by the glazed look in everyone's eyes regarding, as when I promised that we are a data-driven organization, I meant it. I started with the high-level performance measures that the council identifies as main priorities, and those are really driven by the departments giving it to the city manager, proposed to the mayor and council. Our strategic plan is active, living document. That means what you propose will become part of what is advanced for the mayor and council. And that means, I think I heard the relationship between money and services, and absolutely. So the budget is tied, it's performance-led budgeting. So Pooley did a great job, Assistant Chief Pooley did a great job of giving you a lot of data that they have within their departments that doesn't rise to the level of the citywide strategic plan. So I'm just sharing with you the context of, you have the citywide strategic plan and data, and then you have performance measures and data within departments. We are asking you to think about holistically, what are the things and priorities that will advance safety in our community. So I thank you for your work, your comments, and thank you for the conversation starter tonight. We have a lot of information. We already have a meeting scheduled for 7:30 tomorrow for debrief. So we'll hit the ground running. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Mayor Corey Woods for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Rosa, and thank you, Whitell, and thank you to everyone from staff who offered presentations tonight, and also obviously thank you to every single member of the task force for being here and spending over 3 hours with us, kind of just setting the stage for, for future meetings. The two things that I would say that the words that are in my head are hopeful and excited. from my perspective, this conversation and a lot of the questions that I saw, I was glued to the chat box all night. The presentations were great, but frankly, seeing all the questions that everyone had just gives us so much to talk about for the next meeting and all the meetings after that. So I'm really excited about the staff going back and frankly getting and compiling all that data that you requested so we can really have a conversation that is based on all of the data that you asked for. So that I'm really, really excited about. Just thank you so much for all the thoughtful questions. And I'm excited. I really think, I know in the chat when we talked about what picture I sort of picked up on was number 10, which was the guy kind of doing some kind of blueprint or architectural rendering. And that's kind of what I thought, was that this group is going to work together with our staff and members of our council to really create a roadmap and a blueprint for the future. And so I'm just really excited about working with everyone here. And I'm excited about in the future meetings, really being able to delve very deep into all the issues that you all brought up tonight. So once again, thanks for spending time with us tonight. Just looking forward to the 28th.
All right, thank you. And we will see you in a couple of weeks, and we will be sending materials to you. And on behalf of our whole planning and process team here, we appreciate your participation. We hope you have a great evening. Thank you.